Following the end of World War II, with the nuclear bombings on the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the Soviet Union became deeply concerned with their lack of nuclear development entering into the Cold War. This led to several rash and frivolous decisions on safety measures that would ultimately lead to one of the worst nuclear disasters in human history. This is known as the Kyshtym disaster. At the orders of Joseph Stalin, a massive nuclear research and development facility was constructed in the foothills of the Ural Mountains, near the highly classified and secret city of Mayak in Russia. The construction and development of this facility was rapid, and, given the Soviet lack of knowledge about the serious dangers of radiation, little care was given to how the waste and plutonium created was handled. The reactors of the facility used a system known as open-cycle cooling, wherein water from the local rivers was allowed to flow directly through the nuclear reactor, creating highly radioactive waste. Furthermore, much of the solid waste produced in this reaction was dumped directly into local lakes and rivers, completely polluting the watershed. However, the real disaster came with how some of the more dangerous solid waste was stored. The chemical reaction the Soviets used to isolate the plutonium from the waste used a system by which ammonium nitrate was produced. This highly radioactive waste was stored in canisters underground and covered with a large cement lid. Over time, as some of these radioactive isotopes decayed, a tremendous quantity of heat was produced. The Soviets responded to this dilemma by building cooling tanks around the larger storage containers. This worked for some time. However, these facilities were poorly maintained and fell into disrepair by 1957. Over time, as the radioactive isotopes kept decaying and ammonium nitrate, a highly explosive chemical, kept precipitating out of the waste, disaster was inevitable. In the late afternoon of September 29, 1957, one of the tanks finally ruptured. Its cooling system had failed days ago, and no one had taken the time to repair it. The combination of a thermal pressure blast and the detonation of the ammonium nitrate contained within the tanks is estimated to have created a blast equivalent to between 70 and 100 tons of TNT. This explosion alone released over 800 picobecquerels of radiation. The fallout cloud resulted in the contamination of an area of more than 20,000 square kilometers. The extreme secrecy surrounding the facility and the lack of urgency in the response by the Soviet government meant that by the time care arrived, it came much too late. In the days following the containment facility's explosion, 10,000 people were evacuated from the surrounding area, given no explanation of why they were being evacuated. Even decades after the incident, the surrounding bodies of water, especially Lake Karachay, where most of the nuclear waste was dumped, maintains the most polluted land on Earth. Although it is impossible to determine an accurate death toll due to the secrecy by the Soviet government and because cancer induced by radiation is indistinguishable from normal cancer, a study conducted by the Institute of Biophysics at the former Soviet Health Ministry in Chelyabinsk found that 8,015 people had died within the preceding 32 years as a result of the accident.
The first canon, to hold safety paramount, was the most violated engineering ethic from the disaster. The safety for both the workers and the nearby population was ignored from the beginning of construction. Little regard was given to the long-term effects of the project and the radioactive waste that was contained in completely insufficient facilities. The second canon, service with competence, was ignored due to the urgency from the government to complete the facility. At that time, Soviet engineers had little understanding of the dangers of radiation and the depth of engineering design that is required to build and maintain a nuclear plant. The third canon, issue true statements, was not followed by the Soviet leaders during the entire project. The local population was completely unaware of their proximity to the nuclear facility and the possible danger that the government put them in. The Soviets reported nothing on the disaster and failed to give proper care to the surrounding population.
This horrible disaster could have been avoided if sufficient research has been done and safety measures were taken seriously. Firstly, they should have a basic safety features such as closed cycle cooling and stable containment. Secondly, additional research into radiation safety should have been done prior to creating the facilities. And thirdly, the engineers should have been more truthful about the possible impact before developing the nuclear reactor. Regardless of the damage, the reputation of the engineering community around that time was not affected severely, as almost nobody knew about the accident until the fall of the Soviet Union 1991. This is because the disaster was kept hidden from the public by the former government, hence most of the blame is placed rightfully on Soviet leadership.